The first time my helper raised her voice at me, it happened 3 places from the front of the supermarket queue, right between the bulk rice and a pyramid of oranges that always looked too perfect to be real. My debit card had just been declined for the 3rd time that week, which made no sense because my pension comes in on the 28th, like a train that never breaks its timetable. She lifted my card up, like a teacher brandishing a note from a naughty child, and announced to the people behind us, "Senora, you must have spent your limit again. You bought all that gourmet stuff yesterday, remember?" The way her words hung in the air made my face burn. People glanced at my sweater, at the scuffed cane I hate kneading, and I could feel that invisible label slide onto me, burden. I am Elena, 69, retired school librarian, widow of a man who always kept receipts in a shoebox with elastic bands. I stretch money like my mother stretched soup. I don't buy gourmet stuff. But the volunteer from the parish program, Marta, with her quick smile and neon nails, had been helping with shopping since my fall in February. She knew my PIN because she insisted it was faster if she just tapped it in when my fingers shook. I let her, and that's on me. I used to be the one people trusted with keys and permission slips, and the shame of not being quite steady anymore is a stubborn fog you try to hide in it. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes, glanced up as the line stalled. He lowered his voice so only I could hear. "Ma'am, there's a note on your account about high gift card purchases. It's unusual." He printed the receipt, folded it once, and slipped it into my bag beneath the bread before carrying on as though nothing had happened. Marta crossed her arms, impatient. "I can cover this today," she said loudly, "but you'll have to repay me in cash. The bank is probably holding your money because of how you spend." I nodded as if she were right, because arguing in public is a humiliation that pins you to the moment and leaves you there. We left with 2 bags, not 4, and my pride dragging behind us like a torn shopping sack. At home, after she took a photo of my card to check something later and rushed off, I read the folded slip the cashier had given me. Among the lines for milk and canned tomatoes were 2 items I had never bought: electronic gift cards, €200 each, activated. The date was the day Marta had insisted on running out for me because the queue was long. My hands stopped trembling. They went cold instead. I called the supermarket and asked for the same cashier. When he picked up, he said quietly, "I thought you hadn't noticed. The loyalty number used on those gift cards isn't your phone number, ma'am." I asked whose it was. "We can't tell you that," he said, "but the same number appears on the charity discount profile for Friends of San Nicholas, the parish program, the one where Marta volunteers. I'm off at 6, he added. "The manager won't mind if I meet you by the bus stop." You didn't hear that from me. My heart thudded. An unexpected ally had stepped out of the blur of faces at the checkout. I folded the receipt into my pocket and made tea I didn't drink. That evening, my phone pinged with a message from my daughter-in-law, "Laura, how's our little system with the volunteer going? Hope it's smooth. Remember what we talked about, keep it simple. Don't stress about money you'll never spend." I stared at the words, at the casual tenderness grafted onto something that felt like a boundary I hadn't agreed to. I wrote back fine, then deleted it. I had never liked the way Laura said, "our," as if my life were a shared project where she held the plans. I went to bed with the receipt under my pillow like a child with a tooth for the fairy. I couldn't sleep. The next morning I walked to the bus stop early, the cane tapping a rhythm I wished a musician could make something beautiful from. When the cashier arrived, he brought a printed ledger. "I shouldn't have done this," he said, eyes on the ground, "but my grandmother got scammed 2 years ago, and I still feel sick about it." He pointed to dates, to entries marked gift card activation, to a pattern. Whenever Marta helped, there were charges outside my normal shops, online cosmetics, delivery services I don't use. He circled the loyalty number. "It's the same every time." I mouthed, "Thank you," and he looked up and said, "Please don't think you're a burden. People count on systems. The system should be safe." His kindness landed exactly where the shame had been. I went home and took out the shoebox where my husband once kept receipts. I put the ledger inside, and on top of it, the cheap mobile phone Laura had given me for emergencies, already logged into my bank with a thumbprint that isn't mine. I charged my old one instead. When Marta buzzed at noon, I didn't open, and she left a voice message. "We can't help if you lock yourself up." Her voice was sugar with a nail in it. I stood very still. In the afternoon, a letter from my bank arrived, the kind printed on good paper. "We observed unusual spending and changed your contactless limit to €100 until you confirm." I don't like being watched, but for the first time in days, the air felt less heavy. I called my son. He didn't pick up. I called again. "Mama, I'm in a meeting," he whispered. In the background, I heard Laura say, "Put it on speaker. She gets confused." I asked to speak to him privately. He sighed. "Mama, if you're stressed, we can set up a guardianship. It's not a punishment, it's practical." I closed my eyes. "I'm a librarian," I said softly. "Not a broken vase." He said nothing. "We'll talk Sunday," he added, and hung up. I sat down on the bed. In the shadow of my wardrobe, the shoebox looked like a small animal waiting for me to open it and take out its teeth. At 6, the buzzer sounded again. It was not Marta. It was my neighbor, Carmen, the concierge's wife. "Elena," she said, eyes sharp, "the volunteer has been sneaking photos of people's mail in the lobby." I told Miguel to check the camera. "You should see this." Cliffhanger, Carmen slid a flash drive into my palm like contraband and whispered, "Don't show anyone until you're ready." The idea of being ready is a joke old people tell themselves when something has already begun without permission. Miguel, the concierge, replayed the lobby camera footage on his little office computer while his radio mumbled about a lost package. The screen showed Marta at the mailboxes, phone held at a careful angle, snapping photos of letters as she pretended to look for hers. Pausing, rewinding, zooming, there was my bank's envelope with my name on it in her frame, the one that had arrived 2 days ago. Miguel tapped the screen. "She's efficient," he said without humor. "She's also sloppy. Doesn't realize the dome camera catches reflections from the glass." In the reflection of the lobby picture frame, the camera captured Marta taking a photo of my card, its numbers flashing for a second like a secret you could almost touch. I walked upstairs and leaned against my door until the breath came back. At 8, my building's WhatsApp group lit up. Someone had found flyers for the parish food drive stuffed in the stairwell. Someone else complained about noisy teenagers, and then Laura appeared with her smooth confidence. "I'm so grateful to the parish for helping my mother-in-law. She tends to get overwhelmed managing money. We simply want her safe." I stared at the word "we" and felt my spine stiffen. Neighbors sent thumbs up and heart emojis. No one asked me if I was safe. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was threaded calmly through polite concern. The next morning brought more small cuts. At the pharmacy, a woman I knew from church touched my arm and said, "We all have to surrender control at some point, Elena." It's brave. I managed to smile. On the bus home, 2 teenagers stood up to offer me a seat for the first time in months, and I couldn't tell if I wanted to thank them or tell them to sit back down and let me stand on my own 2 creaky feet. In the hallway, a note hung on my door with blue painter's tape. "To keep you from losing things, please leave your card in the kitchen basket. We'll collect it before shopping. M." My kitchen does have a woven basket for keys. The note felt like someone had walked barefoot through my habits. That afternoon, my bank app pinged on my old phone, "A request to link a new number to your account has been made." I hadn't requested anything. I pressed deny, and immediately an SMS arrived on the other phone, the one Laura had set up. "Your change is confirmed." I unplugged it and removed the SIM with my thumbnail. Under my breath, I said a word librarians aren't supposed to enjoy. The rule of my world slid into focus. Whoever controls the phone controls the money, and whoever controls the narrative controls whether the phone in your hand is considered confusion or independence. I poured the jasmine tea my rheumatologist says is good for nerves, and I wrote a list. It was not the sort of list you make on New Year's Eve with promises you'll break. It was the list librarians make when a book goes missing, who checked it out, who had access, what dates line up, which signatures don't belong to the person you know. I called my bank and spent 30 minutes answering questions to prove I was me. The woman on the line listened in a way that soothed me even when she asked for my first headmistress's surname. We can put strong controls on your card, she said. Daily contactless limit €20. No online transactions without SMS. No cash withdrawals above €50 without our call to your landline. We can also require a second factor for any phone number changes. I said yes to everything. One more thing, she added. We can mark your account under our vulnerable customer protocol if you like. It gives you extra checks, but it also means we'll call a social worker if unusual patterns appear. The word vulnerable tasted like metal. Do it, I said. If their system needed a label to force it to protect me, I would wear it like armor. At 9, a parcel arrived, Laura's gift of a new smartphone with bigger icons. It came with a pre-installed Care app that requested permission to read my notifications. I laughed at the ceiling. Care, I said to the empty kitchen. What a graceful word for a hand in your pocket. I put the phone in the shoebox with the ledger and the flash drive. I wrote next to it, Exhibit C. 2 days later, another letter slid under my door with obvious haste, past due, electricity bill. That stung because I am the sort of woman who pays things 3 days early as a superstition against chaos. That afternoon, the parish posted photos on Facebook. Marta smiled beside a pyramid of canned peaches, the caption praising her dedication to elders. In one photo, in the background on the table, I could see a stack of gift cards like the ones on my receipt, their orange corners peeking out. At 6 that evening, an SMS flashed on my old phone. Confirm purchase €249.99, online cosmetics. Below it were 2 buttons, approve/deny. I pressed deny and felt something in my chest unclench. 30 seconds later, the buzzer rang. Marta's voice crackled through the intercom, bright and high. It's me. I'll just come up and collect your card for the morning shop. You seemed confused last time. I closed my eyes, pressed the intercom button and said, the card is in the kitchen basket, then left it there deliberately, camera poking out, and sat on the sofa with the shoebox in my lap. I was going to be a burden tonight, on purpose, and if that didn't work, then I wasn't the librarian I thought I was. The lock turned. She didn't announce herself, just walked straight to the kitchen. The wicker basket scraped. The lens of the tiny camera Carmen's grandson had let me borrow peered up through the weave. Marta murmured, there you are, darling, to the card. On her way out, she took the electricity bill from the counter too. She did not see me in the darkened hall. Cliffhanger. When the door closed, I opened the shoebox and took out the police form I'd already filled in, the one that begins with description of incident, and at the bottom wrote in neat capitals, video evidence to be delivered tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I slept the way you do before a blood test, lightly, mind rehearsing steps in order. At 8, I called the Policia Nacional and asked where to bring proof of financial abuse. Bring everything, the officer said, even if you think it's small. I put the ledger, the receipts, the lobby footage, the phone with the Care app, and the little basket camera on the table and photographed them in daylight as if I were cataloging a new collection. On the way out, I passed Carmen. She squeezed my forearm and said, when Miguel checked last night's hallway camera, he caught your girl leaving with your card and waving to a car that waited with its engine on. She lowered her voice. 3 nights this month there's been a man waiting at 10. Same car. She handed me a scrap of paper with a license plate. I wrote it down because I'm a nosy old woman, she said, and we both smiled. A witness hiding in plain sight, that's a librarian's favorite kind of character. At the station, a young officer named Salas listened without the impatience people reserve for the old. He asked permission to view the videos. He took notes. This is not a misunderstanding, he said finally, sliding a complaint number across the desk. This is a pattern. We'll open a case. He gave me a printed checklist that included notify bank, freeze card if necessary, and do not confront. I won't, I said, although a part of me wanted to stand on the parish steps and read out the ledger like a liturgy. He asked if anyone in my family had pushed me toward this volunteer. I hesitated. My daughter-in-law mentioned the program. She organizes parts of the charity. He arched an eyebrow but didn't say what I was thinking. We'll approach the charity formally, he said, and the supermarket as well. As I stood to leave, he added, your vulnerable customer flag at the bank will help. They'll issue provisional credits while we investigate. I hadn't told him I'd done that yet. My grandmother, he said with a rueful tilt of his head. We learned. By noon, my bank's fraud department had called. They'd seen the denied cosmetics purchase, the gift cards, and the card-present transactions that didn't fit my pattern. We've put a hold on the disputed amounts, the woman said. You'll see a provisional credit within 2 business days. I made tea directly in the mug, the way my grandson hates, and sat on my sofa watching that number hover in the air like fresh bread, money I could use for electricity and rent while the system did its slow work. Small victory. At 2, a new blow. Laura called, her voice smooth as always. Mama, someone from the parish says you're confused and accusing volunteers. We're worried. Maybe I should come and take your cards to keep them safe. Something inside me clicked into a place that held. No, I said, warmed by a calm I hadn't felt since my fall. Actually, I was just on my way to the parish to thank them. There's a luncheon, isn't there? She paused. Yes. Why? Because, I said, I've decided to be a burden properly, in public, where everyone can see what that really means. Silence, then a brittle laugh. You always loved a scene. No, I whispered into the mouthpiece. But I love a catalog. I spent the afternoon at social services with a woman who wore kindness like a cardigan. We filled out forms that allowed me to designate my bank to call a specific friend, Carmen, if someone tried to change my details. We registered me for a security protocol that required any new helper to sign a code of conduct and present ID at my door, not just a smile and a lanyard. The word vulnerable appeared on every page, and I let it. Willingly placing myself in a category I had dreaded gave me the legal trump card the officer had hinted at. Anyone asserting control over my finances without my consent now stepped into a defined offense, not a family misunderstanding. When I got home, I found my kitchen basket empty and a note under a magnet. Don't worry, I have your card, M. I opened the drawer with the sugar jar where I sometimes hid wine money. The second card, my backup, was gone too. My chest hummed, steady and low. Miguel buzzed. She just left, he said, with a shopping bag that clinked like bottles. We got a clear shot of her taking a photo of your card on the stairwell. I thanked him. He added, and your daughter-in-law? She was in the car. The humming grew louder, but stayed steady. An important document I had left by the door, the parish assisted shopper form, was also missing. Of course it was. Cliffhanger. I looked at the clock and smiled at the absurdity of it. The parish luncheon would start in 40 minutes, and for the first time in months, I wasn't late to anything that mattered. The parish hall smelled of coffee and floor polish, the way every school assembly did when I was young. The banner read, "Thank you, volunteers," letters cut out of gold paper by children who deserved better role models. Marta stood near a table of tortilla and olives, accepting praise as though it were a job. Laura moved in her orbit, arranging platters, whispering to the priest, her hand light on his arm. When they saw me, their expressions slid into place, the concerned one on Laura, the patient one on Marta. I came to say thank you, I began, voice even. People turned politely. And to apologize for the confusion I caused by thinking I had spent money I didn't remember spending. A ripple of relief spread across faces. Then I set the shoebox on the table beside the olives and removed the lid. I am not dramatic. Librarians don't slam books, we place them. I placed the ledger first, then the printed receipts, then the little camera. The hall had a microphone, I didn't need it. This is a list of transactions on my card. On days I did not shop, I said, fingers steady. This loyalty number does not belong to me. It belongs to the charity discount profile. A murmur. Marta laughed very softly. She's confused, she told the room. I nodded. I am confused by how often my card bought gifts for other people. I stepped aside and Officer Salas entered through the kitchen door, not in uniform but with the gravity of someone used to rooms. Behind him, the supermarket manager, cheeks flushed, and the young cashier, tie straightened like he wished he were invisible. Salas nodded to me. May I? I handed him the ledger. He addressed the room as if he were reading announcements at a school play. We have a report of unauthorized transactions on a senior's account. We have video of a volunteer photographing a bank card and mail, and we have records of gift card purchases linked to the volunteer's loyalty number. He looked at Marta without hostility. We're here to ask questions. Laura stepped forward, voice sharpened with indignation. Officer, this is absurd. Elena agreed for help. She's vulnerable. Sometimes she asks for things and forgets. A man near the back, Miguel, in his work jacket, cleared his throat and lifted a USB drive. The lobby footage, he said, and handed it to the manager, who connected it to a projector like it was a school movie day. On the wall, in dull colors, appeared the image of Marta with my card in the stairwell, my numbers like white bones for a second on the screen, then her phone hovering over my mail. The room went very quiet. Even the clink of coffee cups stopped. Marta's cheeks flushed an ugly color. That is out of context, she said. I was checking if her card was damaged. And I told her I'd check her mail. The video switched to the basket camera footage, her hand taking my card from the wicker, slipping it into her pocket, then removing the electricity bill. She looked, for the first time since I met her, like someone who did not know what to do next. From the other side of the hall, a woman I recognized from the parish office raised her hand like a student. There's also the volunteer reimbursement forms, she said, and laid a folder on the table. Marta claimed cash reimbursements for deliveries she never signed out. She looked at me with a small smile. We asked our accountant to run a check when the police called. I hadn't known about the accountant, but there she was, my ally in the shadows, hadn't just been the cashier or Miguel. Behind her, my son stood. He had arrived without my seeing, and his face looked empty in a way that frightened me more than anger would have. He looked like a man trying to decide between the story he had been told and the one playing on the wall. Salas checked his phone and stepped closer to Marta. While we've been in this room, a purchase request of €249. 99 went through on this card, he said, holding up a screenshot. The bank had forwarded it to him after confirming the block. It was denied by the account holder's SMS. The device that attempted the purchase is registered to a number ending in 63. Whose phone ends in 63? Marta swallowed. Laura's hand flew to her bag, then dropped. The room inhaled. The priest, a man who knows both the weight of forgiveness and the limits of it, spoke quietly. We are not a courtroom, he said. But we do care about our reputation and our people. Salas nodded. This isn't a courtroom, he agreed, but the police station is. For now, we'd like to ask Ms. Marta to come with us. Marta turned to Laura, who took a step back as though the floor had moved under her. The blind spot that would ruin them both wasn't greed, it was the assumption that kindness would never push back. As they escorted Marta out, my son crossed the room. His mouth opened, closed. Mama, he said, voice cracking the way it did when he was 13 and broke a window. Did Laura know? I looked at him steadily. She put a phone in my house that allowed someone else to approve my purchases, I said. Whether she knew where that path led is her business with herself. He nodded, jaw tightening. The manager of the supermarket cleared his throat and spoke into the sudden awkward quiet. We will be returning the funds through our gift card liability process for any cards not yet used, he said, and we'll support the bank's chargebacks for those that were. People stared at their plates, not at me. And then, from near the coffee urn, Carmen, my neighbor who never lifts her voice, said loudly enough for everyone, Elena, sit here. She patted the chair at the head of the table, the seat reserved for guests of honor. I sat. It was not triumph. It was the simple dignity of being the person whose name was attached to her own chair. Laura stood motionless. Finally, she whispered, I only wanted to make things easier, but no one was listening. Even we can run out of people. Cliffhanger. As the room began to buzz with low conversations, my son looked at me and said, Come stay with me tonight, and I, who had spent weeks being handled, said, We'll discuss terms. The bank credited the disputed amounts within 48 hours as promised, provisional first and then final after the police supplied their case number. Their letter used phrases like unauthorized transactions and elder financial abuse, but the line I read twice was the plain one, your balance is restored. An investigator explained how chargebacks worked in simple sentences that felt respectful, not condescending. The supermarket froze the activated gift cards that hadn't been redeemed and reversed the ones they could. Marta was charged with fraud and misuse of personal data. I signed a victim statement in a small room with fluorescent lighting and walked out into sun that felt like mine again. At home, I changed the locks. The parish asked me to speak at a training about boundaries, never give a volunteer your PIN, how to set €20 daily contactless limits, what SMS approval looks like, where to report suspicious behavior. I spoke with the measured rhythm of years spent reading aloud to classes, steady, calm, no melodrama. People listened. The priest announced a new policy. Volunteers would no longer handle clients' cards. Vouchers would be issued instead and signed by both parties. Laura left the luncheon early that day and did not call for a week. When she did, she sounded smaller, as if the air had been let out of a plan. I didn't tell her to do it, she said. I knew that. I also knew she had arranged the stage and lit the lights. I told her about the social worker's forms that now required her to present ID to be my helper. She said, that feels hostile. I said, it feels legal. My son came over with a bag of groceries he'd chosen himself, nothing expensive, nothing wasted. He put the yogurt in the back like I do, the milk up front like I taught him when he was 10. Terms, I said, and we established small, clear ones. Visits by invitation, no talk of guardianship unless my doctor recommended it, and a promise that if he worried, he would talk to me before talking about me. He cried, which he has done twice in his adult life, when his father died, and now. We had soup and watched a quiz show, and when the contestant missed a question about 19th century poets, we yelled the answer together and laughed. In the weeks after, I did something I had been embarrassed to do. I joined a Tuesday morning group at the library called Tech for Grown-Ups, where a teenager named Alba taught us how to spot fake links and set app permissions to never. We practiced pressing deny with our thumbs until it felt like a form of prayer. I stood at the bus stop one day and saw the young cashier across the street on his break. I waved, and he waved back with that small look of relief you have when something you worried about while you brushed your teeth has turned out all right. Carmen brought me a plant for my window ledge, a stubborn little succulent that survives on tiny sips. I did not become stronger. I did not transform. I put my house back in order with the slow, sure gestures of someone who has run a library that never closes. My dignity didn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It sat down beside me while I made lists, called numbers, signed forms, and asked people to do their jobs. The best revenge was not applause at the parish hall or Marta's red face. It was the tiny vibration of my old phone every time a purchase request came through, and the deep pleasure of pressing deny when it wasn't mine. If there is a lesson here, and I won't lecture, I promise, it's that sometimes the only way to be safe is to agree, in writing, to be vulnerable so that the machine obeys you. Sometimes the way out of being called a burden is to insist on burdening the right structures, the bank, the police, the parish, the rules. And sometimes the person you least expect, the cashier with tired eyes, the concierge with a USB drive, turns the whole story. On Sunday evenings now, I walk to the park at the end of my street, sit on a bench with Carmen, and watch children climb the ship-shaped play structure. My son joins sometimes, and we argue about which dog is fastest without standing up. When my phone buzzes with an SMS, I glance at it and slide it back into my pocket. It is almost always my own shopping, and I approve it without ceremony. But once in a while, when I feel the weight of that small decision in my thumb, I look at the people passing and wonder, if your life had a button, what would you choose to approve, and what would you finally deny?